Now, it's time to begin the question of passing your opponent's open guard. The first requirement on your part is to achieve a good level of proficiency in the most high percentage methods of passing an open guard. If you look at modern competition, you'll notice that certain methods of passing guard constantly figure in the program. I could sit here all day and show you exotic methods of passing someone's guard, and you'll never use them in live situations. It's no secret that there's a small subset of the major guard passes in Jiu-Jitsu which are responsible for 90 to 95% of the actual guard passes in competition. Focus your efforts on these. Okay, exotic surprise moves can work for a day, a week, a month. As soon as people figure them out, they're going to stop working. But the high percentage methods that have worked across the board for a wide array of athletes in all weight divisions, at all belt levels, is going to work for you too. Your responsibility is to become very competent in these various methods. I can't show you how to combine moves together and use advanced concepts of passing guard until you gain basic proficiency in these fundamental methods of passing. The first high percentage method of passing an opponent's guard, which we're going to look at, is the double underpass. There's a reason why I favor this as the first guard pass you should learn. Always understand that when we go to pass someone's guard, two things are going on. I'm trying to actively pass my opponent's guard while they are actively trying to attack me with sweeps and submissions. So it's a two-way street here. Okay, anyone can just perform a guard pass on an opponent if the other guy just doesn't know how to attack from guard. It's easy, but that's not the challenge. The challenge is to be able to pass someone's guard while they're attacking you. That's what becomes interesting. Now, anytime I'm in front of my opponent's legs, my opponent can be very, very dangerous to me depending upon his skill level. But one great way for us to significantly reduce the submission danger that we face is to put both of my arms underneath both of my opponent's legs. Okay? From situations like this, the main submission holds of the sport, arm bars, triangles, kimuras, etc., are very difficult for my opponent to achieve. They're not impossible, but they're difficult. As opposed to situations where my arms are inside my opponent's legs, like so, rather than underneath them, where there's a vast array of various attacks my opponent can use against me. Most of the major forms of open guard get shut down once my two arms go underneath. It's hard for my opponent to go into spider guard, lasso guard. You can't get into any kind of Ashigurami or X guard from these situations. Okay, so the great thing about going underneath both of your opponent's legs is not only is it a very sound way of actually physically passing someone's guard, but it has a tremendous shutdown effect right from the start, which makes it difficult for my opponent to apply the major moves of open guard, either sweeps or submissions, against me. It makes most of the main variations of open guard very difficult to apply. So as a result, if I can get my two arms underneath my opponent, underneath my opponent's legs, I can more or less focus on the act of guard passing rather than have to split my focus between defending his attacks and passing his guard. So it's an excellent one for us to start with. Okay. The question, of course, is how am I going to get my two arms underneath my opponent's legs in a live combative situation? Because very often my opponent will be looking to control my two sleeve cuffs and from here get inside my biceps with his feet hooked through underneath with all kinds of crazy lassos and etc. And now it's going to be hell for me to get my arms underneath his, okay, underneath his legs, sorry. So what we need is a method of getting underneath the legs that works exceptionally well. Okay, I'm going to show you that right now. From a situation where I start off in front of my training partner at a distance, as I go to approach, what I want to do is I want to expose my training partner's hamstrings. Okay, as long as his feet are tucked close to the buttocks, like so, it's actually quite difficult for me to get underneath my opponent's legs. And as I fight to get underneath my opponent's legs, it's quite easy for him to start latching onto my sleeve cuffs and causing potential problems for me now. It's also quite easy once I get this close for my opponent to hook into my legs, and now it becomes extremely difficult for me to go in. Okay, so that's clearly not going to do it. I can't have situations where my opponent's feet are close to the buttocks, and I come in a standing position and try to swim underneath the legs. So my recommendation to you, before you even attempt to get your hands underneath your opponent's legs, is to take your opponent's feet high above his own knees and expose the hamstring muscles behind your training partner's legs. That's always my recommendation. If I find I cannot do that, then there's better guard passes that we can employ than going double under, okay? So my thing is, as I first go out to approach an opponent, is I stand at a certain distance, okay? This distance is measured by my opponent's toe line, the line that joins his two big toes. If I start stepping up to and beyond the toe line, my opponent can easily hook into my legs. And now there's no way I'm going to be able to get into a double under position. So my first thing here is regulating distance. I always make sure I stay outside of Mateus's toe line. From a position like that, it becomes quite easy for me to take my two hands and place them right here on the soles of my training partner's feet. As I make contact with the soles of the feet, I run my training partner's ankles high up just like so, and I expose his hamstrings to me. An alternative method of doing the same trick, if you don't want to use the soles of the feet, is to go underneath your training partner's Achilles tendons, just like so. And you do more or less the same thing. You run your training partner's legs up so that the feet become higher than the knees. Please understand that if my opponent's feet are lower than his knees, it's exceptionally difficult for me to pommel underneath my opponent's legs. And now it's easier for him to pommel through and around and defeat me. Okay? So what we always want is our opponent's foot higher than his knee. This exposes the hamstring and makes it very easy for us to get the preferred shoulder on the hamstring position. Anytime the feet is lower than the knees, I have to lift with my arms, and it's very hard for me to get my shoulder down to the hamstring. And very easy for him, as I do this, to pommel his foot underneath my legs and cause all kinds of problems for me. Okay? So our whole thing is to get our training partner's ankles higher than his knees and expose the hamstring. That will make the act of going underneath the leg much easier, and the act of getting the shoulder underneath also much easier. Okay? So the easiest way for us to start this business is through distance. I start at a distance outside of my training partner's toe line, so he can't just hook into my legs. Okay? I'm very circumspect about exposing my sleeve cuffs to my opponent, because once they get sleeve cuffs, things can get tough from here. Okay, that's when they start swimming feet inside and causing problems for us. Okay, so I stand at a distance where he can't access my sleeve cuffs very easily, and he can't access my legs with his legs. From here, I go straight through on my training partner. I go either under or at the soles of the foot, and I run my training partner's legs and body up so the feet point at the ceiling. Okay, as soon as we get here, there's no reason now why I can't go underneath my training partner's legs and get through into this good attacking position. You will notice that I form a slight angle across my training partner. I never want to be directly in front of my training partner on the center line. We always want to divide our opponent's body into center line, which is undesirable, and diagonal line, which goes from shoulder to opposite hip. And we always want to line our body up as much as possible with the diagonal line. The more I stay directly on the center line, the more my opponent can spread his knees, and makes it very, very hard for me now to lift and work. What I'm looking for is my shoulder underneath my training partner's hamstring and alignment with my training partner's diagonal line. Now when he goes to make the knees go apart from each other, it's much less likely for my opponent to be successful. Okay? At the same time, both of my hands are underneath my opponent's legs. So when Mateus goes for arm locks, triangles, etc., it's so difficult for him to work successfully. Okay? So that's our initial entry theory. Let's have a look at that again. We work at a certain distance outside of our training partner's toe line. From here I go through and I make an initial catch on my training partner and I expose the hamstrings, whether I go under or here. Okay. Once the hamstrings are exposed, my shoulder can go underneath my opponent's legs. What I don't want to do is have situations where the feet are low and I'm trying to come down to my opponent's leg, like so, with my shoulder. You can see my shoulder never really makes it. Okay, now Mateus starts pommeling in with the second leg. Now you're in triangle probably. Oh, it's a disaster. Okay, So rather than me going down to his hamstring, as much as possible, I want to finagle situations where I bring his legs up to my shoulder rather than my shoulder down to him. Now, our first concern is alignment with that diagonal line. Okay? And from here, we want to do all of our work on that diagonal line. The problem is your opponent knows this. Okay? And he wants to start moving from this position. So I need to anchor myself to that diagonal line. And the best anchor we can work with is our training partner's lapel. And lock in just like so. You can come all the way up high. I'll look at that soon. But my first catch, I generally like to lock it just below the line of my training partner's pectorals. Okay? The reason for this is because it closes my elbow. The more I reach up early here, the more I expose my elbow to Mateusz. And now he can start pushing, posting up, pommeling his knee inside, and realigning his body with mine. So I want to minimize my elbow exposure. If we just come in this way, Mateusz. I want to minimize elbow exposure. If I go too early up to the high collar grip, look how I've exposed my elbow to Mateusz, and he easily comes through, pommels his knee inside, and realigns his body with mine. Okay? So when I get my shoulder in, my first catch is typically low here, so that I can close my elbow down. When Mateusz tries to pommel on the elbow now, it's considerably more difficult. I sacrifice a little bit in head control when I use this grip, but I gain in minimizing elbow exposure. Here, I do a good job of controlling the head, but now I've exposed my elbow, and that means I have no control of the head now. So I lock in, just like so. And from this position, I go to work. I turn my body somewhat side on to my training partner. Now I go reaching underneath, and I catch my training partner at the drawstring of the pants. I come up, and I bring my knee as a wedge behind my training partner's lower back, holding him in place. And as a result, we're in good position now to work with our chest here on our training partner's hamstring. Okay, so one of my favorite ways to work the position. So I'll show it from a different angle so you can see what's happening here. As we start off working with our training partner, our first thing is distance. Okay, I stay just outside of the toe line. Now, contact, I don't expose my sleeve cuffs to him and give him the advantage. I go either at the soles of the feet or the Achilles tendon. I lower my level and I run everything up high and I point his feet at the ceiling. This will expose my training partner's hamstrings. Now, a quick level change down. We're underneath our training partner's two legs. I catch fairly low on the lapel, lower than is conventional, so that I can hide my elbow from my training partner. Now from here, Mateusz starts his usual defensive reactions. I align myself with my training partner's diagonal line. I come to the drawstring of the pants, and I put a knee as a wedge in behind my training partner. So we end up head over head. My head directly above his head. Okay? This is an excellent position to do our work from and go to pass our training partner's guard. This is the first position I want you to get to and dominate this position. Now, you still haven't passed your opponent's guard. You haven't cleared the legs yet. What I do now is I start progressively working my hand up to a higher and higher grip. Now I'm going to control the head because I no longer need to worry about my exposed elbow. I can just block with the hand, but I usually like to use the lapel whenever possible. From this position, I come around the corner and I start taking my second knee off the floor. I'll just show that here. I've currently got one knee off the floor. Sorry, Mateusz, don't push back at me, buddy, so you didn't get hurt. From here, I just take my second knee up off the floor and I start to arch my body so he starts to feel weight. And I use chest pressure on my training partner's thigh. I bring my elbow over my training partner's head and I settle down into a good pin. From here, my head comes down just enough so I can start the action of walking back up into a solid pin that controls my opponent's head and the near leg. So when Mateusz tries to put me back in guard, my elbow and shoulder block out his attempts to bring the legs in. If that wasn't there, he could bring his knee back in and presumably put me back in guard. Okay? Now, there's a lot of little details there. Let's look at that again. Okay, start. The first thing we need is a good approach to our opponent. I can't just have a naive approach where I'm down here on two knees. He's at a distance where he can easily access my sleeve cuffs. And now it's going to be hell for me to get underneath my opponent's two legs. Okay? I can't just naively put a hand under, he pommels his leg, and you just end up in a game where you never get underneath your opponent's legs. That's a disaster. Okay, so we need a satisfactory approach. I recommend in general standing approach based on distance, with a fundamental measure of distance is your opponent's toe line. Okay, I stand just outside of the toe line, and I play a game where I don't go too close to the knees, and I don't give them access for free to my sleeve cuffs. Okay, rather I create situations where I work down at the feet, and I'm looking to expose his hamstrings. So a small level change and a quick run that points his feet up at the ceiling. Now from here, the knees come down, and we work at the exposed hamstrings. Okay. From here, I go through and I take a fairly low grip that doesn't expose my elbow to my opponent. I align myself with that precious diagonal line from one hip to the opposite shoulder. My hand goes through underneath my training partner's lower back, and from here, I create a lift and a wedge. My knee and thigh is a wedge, and I go head over head with my training partner. So when he tries to move backwards on his shoulders, it's quite difficult. Okay? Now, from this position, if I don't put weight on it, he just kind of walks shoulder to shoulder. That's a constant problem in this position. But when I go head over head, it's very hard for him to walk shoulder to shoulder away from me. Okay? Now, from this position, watch how I take my right knee off the mat. Apologies, there's some pressure here. As the right knee comes off, we start that pressure as my body arches into almost like a sprawl. And then from this position, as I feel the legs sliding and pointing away from me, my elbow comes over, and my left elbow blocks his attempts to put me back in guard. Now from here, we settle down to our knees. As Mateus frames and goes to bring his knee back inside, you'll see my left arm makes it exceptionally difficult for him to do so. He needs to move his head away from me to put me back in guard. But my elbow position means when he goes to move the head away, it's difficult. He needs to bring his right knee between us to put me back in guard. But if my hand is positioned here and he goes to bring that right knee in, it's blocked. So the inside knee and the head are both blocked. Mateus, got to put me back in guard, buddy. And it's an exceptionally difficult pin to work against. And then at the end of your pass, you often find you've got a fantastic pin that prevents your opponent getting a quick and easy escape back to guard after your pin. So let's run through all of that again. One of the most fundamental of the various guard passes comes in many variations, by the way. This is the first variation that I want you to master. Okay, this is one good variation among many. We'll be coming back to this soon. So we come through towards our training partner. I go down and catch the feet. I run until the feet start to point at the ceiling. I pinch with my knees and create a situation where the exposed hamstrings mean I can get my shoulder underneath my training partner's hamstring, like so, as opposed to my biceps underneath the hamstrings, which makes it very difficult for me to finish the move. Mateus, put some pressure on me and resist. It's very hard for me to throw legs by when I'm working like so. Okay, Mateus has very good hips from bottom position. Okay, you cannot throw hips by on a guy like this. It's not going to happen. Okay, a common beginner's mistake, you'll see this in every white belt class, is guys think the idea is you get underneath the leg and you throw a leg by. Just let the leg go. Throw the leg by. That's never going to work beyond white belt class. Okay. Throw by. There are throw bys from Toreandos, but not from this position. Okay. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how much you can throw around in the gym, etc., etc. If Mateus puts his weight down on this side, you are not going to throw your opponent's leg by. So much worse when Mateus pommels his foot underneath my thigh, and then it becomes even worse. Okay. The idea is to operate with your shoulder underneath the hamstring. You're not throwing the leg by. You're creating a mechanical position where he cannot move his hips against you. The hips are pointing to the ceiling. They're no longer in a mechanical position to resist your forward pressure. Okay? Rather than throw the legs by, we just make his feet point away from us. They're currently pointing off into the distance. Now his feet are pointing away. Step number 2 is to make his knees point away. Make a strong resistant body, Mateus. From here, as I go into the sprawl action, look how Mateus's knees start pointing away. As they point away from me, the elbow follows. The knees are pointing away from the direction of my body. Now he needs to bring the knees back and face me to put me back in guard. But I have this blocking shoulder and grip here. So when Mateus goes to put me back in guard, it's exceptionally difficult. And you have a very, very strong pin after your pass. So this is a wonderful form of pass that first shuts down your opponent's ability to attack you. Most of the more popular methods of working from open guard, X guard, butterfly guard, you name them, De La Riva guard, they're all impossible if I put both of my arms underneath your legs. So its first great virtue is it shuts down all the most popular forms of open guard. Secondly, it takes away the danger of 90% of the main submission holds in the sport. It makes most of the major sweeps of the sport impossible. So it has a tremendous negating effect right off the bat. That lets you focus on what you want to do because you're not worried about what he's doing to you as you're attempting it. And if we employ this idea of exposing your opponent's hamstring so you can get into a mechanically advantageous position where your shoulder is underneath his hamstring rather than your bicep, and you can occupy that diagonal line, align yourself with that, then we can get his hips up facing the ceiling, put him in a weak mechanical position, and from there, the guard passes come easy. When we work from here, standard methods of operation involve gripping across our training partner's body and then creating a situation where we start to put pressure on our training partner. Start head over head, and then a sprawling method where the shoulder clears his legs and makes his knees point away from us. And then from here, we go over the top, control our training partner's head, and end up in a perfect passing position. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to pass the guard when you first start off, and you'll be using it all the way through to black belt. It works at the highest levels. However, like anything in life, because it's so popular, people get damn good at stopping it. You're going to run into very talented individuals who have good hips. And even if you do get underneath your opponent's legs, it's no guarantee that you're going to be able to get his leg up on your shoulder. Okay, and this guy's good, he's got good hips, and you try to bring him up, and you're like, oh my God, this guard pass used to be so good for me, and now it sucks, okay? Well, one thing's for sure, you always do need to get the leg up on the shoulder. That's always an advantage, okay? But guys get very good at walking the shoulders back, okay? So even if I do get the leg up on the shoulder, they walk back and away from you, they put a hand on your hip, they start posting on your hip, and you feel like, man, even when I do get the leg up on the shoulder, I still can't pass, okay? Whenever you get extreme levels of resistance, my recommendation to you is to go back into a position that takes away all of his mechanical advantage and creates great mechanical advantage for me. This is the plow position, okay? So we go through on our training partner, we lock up, and from double unders, I focus on bringing his hips up just enough that I can get my hand underneath his lower back. Now think about it, guys. To get your hand under his lower back isn't asking for much because the width of your hand is incredibly narrow. So I'm not asking you to lift his hips high up off the floor. Only the width of your hand is necessary, okay? So I put just enough pressure that I can get the width of my hand under. And once we do that, we focus here on the lift that puts my opponent's toes to the mat, okay? Now, once we get toes to mat, we're going to use our head to clear the legs. Your opponent can post his hand on your hip and make things quite difficult for you from here. So I don't lead with my hips, okay? Rather, I take my head down to his thighs, make a strong resistant body, Mateus. So I bring my head down to his thighs, and I use my head to look across the hip line and bring my head to his far hip. And as a result, we walk our training partner down to the mat and end up in good position. The idea is, let's go this way. I take my training partner up into the plow, and I take my head from inside his legs to outside. Now, even as he pushes hard on my hip here, the idea is I take my head to the far side of the hip and I walk the hips down with my head, okay? You have to use your head as a battering ram and the target is the far hip. So once again, we manage to get underneath our opponent's legs. Typically the way we do this is by exposing the hamstrings. We come through and as a result, bang, we get a good catch, okay? Now he's doing all the right things and making it difficult, making us resistant. So we bring his knee to the center line. Okay, if his back is flat on the ground, look how hard it is for me to get his leg to the shoulder. So difficult. So instead, what we do is you bring this knee here towards the mat, and I bring this knee to the center line. And as a result, I level change to get my leg up. Guys, I'm going to urge you to avoid lifting methods to get the leg to the shoulder. Lifting methods work well when you're in white belt class, but if this man has good hips, look how it is for me to lift a leg to the shoulder. Instead, what I recommend is bring the knee to the center line by pushing the opposite knee and go down to him rather than bring him up to you. Okay? Now I focus on just getting my hand underneath his lower back. From here, I touch his toes to the mat. Once we get the toes to the mat, I bring my head to outside position, and I use my head as a battering ram, going for the far hip. Even as Mateus holds me off, Mateus's frame stops me coming forward to the head, but it doesn't stop me from turning the corner towards the hips. Look how if I drive to the head, Mateus's frame holds me up. As long as my head is inside the leg, it stops me. But when I bring my head around the corner to stop me, Mateus, I turn towards the hips. That's when we go past the frame and we get to our destination. Okay? Getting the head outside the legs and turning to the hips can be a very nice way of working when you have strong framing resistance from a tough and talented opponent. Now, continuing with the most high percentage guard passes in the sport and developing our mechanical proficiency. The theme that we're trying to push here is that your first step in your journey to becoming a really strong passer of open guard is that you've got to have a certain number of guard passing methods, and you've got to be at a certain level just to get them to work on resisting opponents. It's rather like if you started off boxing and you developed certain kind of skills, footwork, movement, head movement, etc., but you just never had an ability to actually hit someone and hurt them. You just always had incredibly weak punches. So you did everything else great, but you just couldn't hurt people. Well, it would be tough for you to come up against another boxer in a live sparring situation just because he just wouldn't respect your punches, and as a result, your other techniques wouldn't be so applicable. So too in guard passing. You can have all kinds of good things, a nice entry, a nice gripping game, etc., but if you can't just mechanically hold someone down and control their movement and pass their guard, it's going to be hard for you to combine moves together and employ all the advanced skills and concepts that we go on to later on in the video. So it's important we just be able to come out and just perform the various main guard passes in the sport at a very good level. That's your first goal when you become when you work on your guard passing game. We're looking now at the over-under guard pass, and this goes very well together with the double under guard pass. People who are good at one also tend to be good at the other. They work in the same way, controlling the hips, but as the name implies, you'll be over one of your opponent's legs and under the other one, as opposed to double under wheel, as the name implies, under both legs. Now, a theme in this video is that ultimately what's going to make you an effective guard passer is your ability to combine guard passing moves together. Okay, that's the big goal out there in the future. First, you got to get good at each guard pass, and then ultimately you got to get good at combining them. But there is one guard pass where if you got sufficiently good at it, you wouldn't find there's that much need to combine it with others. This is kind of like a standalone guard pass where if you were just very, very good at it, you could flesh this out all the way very successfully to black belt. And that's the over-under guard pass. It's so mechanically efficient and so conceptually simple that it just works almost by itself. It doesn't really need combinations in the same way that many of the other guard passes do. So it's important you learn this one. Let's have a look at the main steps. Okay, we've got an opponent down in a supine position. Your first step is to trap one of your opponent's ankles. Your second step will be to trap your opponent's knee on the same side. Your third step will be to return to your opponent's center line, and then ultimately to perform a back step that creates a situation where both of your opponent's legs are on one side of his center line and you're outside of both of his legs. Okay, so conceptually it's very, very simple. Just a short number of steps involved. First thing you got to do is you've got to trap an ankle. Okay, so we're going to get a grip on our training partner as I stand outside my training partner's toe line. I'm going to get a grip here on my training partner's gi pants on the outside. Okay, I'm not allowed to put my fingers inside the cuff of my training partner's gi pants. So I take a grip on the outside, taking the flap of cloth that will always exist regardless of your opponent's gi manufacturing brand, and we use this to get the heel of the hand controlling our opponent's foot in a downward direction. Okay, if my opponent tries to bring the foot up, I should be able to create a downward force with the grip that I've employed to push the foot down. Okay, my second hand is not going to grab the cloth. It's just going to go here inside my training partner's knee. Okay, I don't want to grab the cloth on the other side. He can start pommeling over the top, good, and causing problems for me on the other side. Okay, so working on the toe line, we go towards our training partner and we fix up our first grip. When I go to fix the first grip, I often use a slap and catch method. Let's face this way, baby. So what I do is I want to get my grip here. Okay, but I don't want my opponent's foot waving around and pommeling over, under, going to my bicep, etc., etc. So what I do is I slap his foot into my hand. Okay, so I put my hand out and I slap his foot in. Sorry, that was a little more hard than I wanted it to be. Now my second hand goes over the top and I push down and I step over, and from here all I do is I just pinch around my training partner's ankle. When he goes to pull the foot around, etc., it's controlled by the pant grip and the knees. Okay, my second hand goes through underneath my training partner's leg, and we fix onto our training partner like so. You'll notice when I first go in, Mateus's foot is now controlled inside my legs. Okay, if he were to go for a triangle, it's physically impossible. Okay, my elbows are retracted and his foot is controlled between my legs. There's no armbar, there's no triangle, there's no kimura, there's nothing. Okay, from here, my next thing is to capture my opponent's knee. I'm going to start the ball rolling by trapping the far hip. I'm currently holding his belt or his gi. They're both good. Okay, but you'll notice this leg here is not yet fully controlled. He can bring his knee across in front of me. He can pommel his foot through. He can do all kinds of things. None of them are good for me. So what I want to do is I want to go over my training partner's knee with my bicep. And I want to put my chin and connect it to my own thumb. Let's move it this way, Mateus. So going forward, I go over the knee and I connect my chin in here. And I come up with my knees off the floor so that Mateus feels weight over his hips. Okay? If he goes to push me back with his hands now, I'm connected to him through the belt grip and my chin position. The further my chin from my hand and the more the knees are on the floor, the more effective his pushing becomes and the more he can pommel his foot back in and cause problems for me. Okay? So we want the connection of hand and chin and the weight of my knees off the mat. You will notice when I take my knees off the mat, my hips are always asymmetrical. Excuse me one minute. I do not bring my hips up symmetrically. Rather, I go asymmetrically with one hip low and one hip high. I don't want symmetry. I want asymmetry so that all my weight goes onto my shoulder on him so he feels that weight. Don't put your knees on the floor. Now there's no weight. Okay? So when we come up, that's the position. And I can walk sideways. I don't walk symmetrically. Always my hips cocked, like so. So once again, we start off in front of the training partner, parked outside the toe line where we're safe. Okay. I use a slap and catch method to get a hold of my training partner's gi pants, and I post inside the opposite knee. I move a little bit to the side, and I capture my training partner's ankle. We go in and lock. My head and my hand connect, and I come up with asymmetrical hips, like so. Okay. That's a good start. We've captured the ankle, and we've captured the far hip. Now, you got to capture the knee. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk up to the knee and capture it with our hip. I push with my hand here. I walk up and up and up until his knee gets caught underneath my hip. When Mateus tries to bring his right knee back to himself, it's locked by my left hip. Now I carry his legs back to the center line. just like so. Okay? So what I want to do is take Mateus's bent, powerful leg and weaken it by straightening it and taking the knee to the center line. Okay? One of the great principles of open guard is that the open guard is only effective when my opponent has one knee on each side of a center line. Anytime you have two knees on one side of the center line, open guard is pathetic. You can easily dominate your opponent in these situations. From his perspective, he always wants one knee on each side of the center line. The beauty of the over-under pass is once I capture his knee, I can lengthen the leg and weaken it and carry the two knees to one side of a center line. Okay, and that's what creates our mechanical advantage. So once again, we come out towards our training partner. I catch right in here. The way I like to do it is a slap and catch method. My hand comes out. I'm ready to grab. I slap Mateus's leg right into my grip. I post the opposite one. I get a little bit of an angle on my training partner so that I can step in and capture my training partner's ankle. Then we go forward and put weight on the man. Now Mateus must preserve his right knee. So he's probably going to be posting on your shoulders, your hip, all those things that people like to do. Okay? Don't worry. Just use the strength of your legs to walk until you capture his knee. Now, I carry his knee back to the center line so that both of his knees are pointing to his left-hand side. My arm is no longer gripping the pants. I'm holding Mateus's hamstring now. Mateus, go to pull your leg out. It's so difficult. Now from here, I simply post. I bring my left foot forward and post. Try to hook my leg, Mateus. And from here, I take my foot and I back step out. Then I put my knee as a wedge underneath his knee so that both of his knees are pointing away from me. As he tries to recover, it's so difficult. I don't go down to my knees. I keep following his hips. If I go to my knees and Mateus moves away, he can bring his knee back in. So as Mateus shrimps, I follow and follow, and I follow, keeping my knee as a wedge underneath his knee. So his two knees are constantly pointing away from me. I always want his knees pointing in the opposite direction of my guard pass. That's a theme we'll be looking at a lot in this video. Mateus wants me to stop so that he can shrimp away, bring his knee in and his other leg over, and put me back in guard. That's what he wants. So I want his knees pointing away. I use my shoulder inside Mateus's thigh to put pressure to make his knees point away from me. Try to put me back in guard, Mateus. Now from here, I take my arm. He's probably going to be posting on me and pushing, etc., etc. I take my arm inside my training partner's bicep, and I get a grip on the back of the collar. As he tries to push me off, I focus on the pull using the collar, and from here, I post here in front of his hips. So when he goes to put me back in guard, it's a difficult thing. And as a result, we get a very powerful pass. Okay? There was a lot in that. So let's start going over some more details here. Okay. First, as always, you need a good entry into your opponent's legs. I use a slap and catch method to get a hold on my training partner, and I post the opposite side. I move a little bit to an angle to open up his ankle and expose it to my legs. And as a result, I can go forward and catch. From here, I go over my training partner's knee with the bicep, and I put my chin in close, like so. Mateus will want to push me off, holding out like so. I use the strength of my legs to walk and shimmy all the way up and capture his knee. Now that I've captured the knee, I want to walk it back to a position of weakness. That's the center line. As I walk it down, my hand position changes around the hamstring. So I let go of the gi pants and I grip the hamstring. As I walk his legs to the center line, he's going to desperately try to hook onto my leg. So there may have to be an act of straightening, hook tight, Mateus, an act of straightening and pommeling until I can pommel my leg over and wedge his leg here. Keeping my knees off the mat. He tries to move away from me. I follow his hips, always looking to make his knees point away from me. At some point, I start coming back, pommel inside, and control the head. Right now I'm controlling the hips, but at some point I've got to transition to the head. As he pushes on me here, I use the back of the lapel to pull my body around the corner and lock and block here. When he goes to put me back in guard, it's a difficult thing. Then we settle down into a good pin across side. I'm just going to show you one important detail with regards to my first hand that begins gripping the gi pants and at a certain point switches from gi pants to holding around the hamstring muscle. I'm going to come close to the camera so you can see this. Okay, when we first enter in on our training partner, we're holding the gi pants. That's a tremendous pushing grip, utilizing the heel of the hand to push everything down in this direction. Okay, because I want to step over the knee and capture the knee. So when I first go in on my training partner, right here, I'm holding the gi pants. Now, as I come up and I capture the knee, I don't need the gi pants anymore. My hip has the knee, so I release, and I just put my hand around the hamstring. Then I walk his leg down to the center line. You can see I'm just holding the hamstring now. As Mateus tries to desperately hold on to my leg, I focus here on that pommeling action on the center line, here. It gets my knee as a wedge underneath his knee and makes his knees point away from me. As Mateus tries to put me back in guard, I stay on the hips. I don't let myself go stationary and his hips move away from me, and now he puts me back in guard. Always you'll hear me screaming at my students. You get to this position, stay on the hips, stay on the hips. He goes to put me back in guard, we stay on the hips. Following and tracking. Okay? Different ways to operate here. One is to go to the head. Another is to go over the far hip. I take my arm out and I control the far hip. Now I join elbow and knee and wedge. Mateus Manoas, push, push, push. I go through his arms to the collar, all the way up here, okay? I use the collar to pull my body to him. And as a result, we end up in a good pin across our training partner's side. That's an alternative way of finishing where we cover the far hip. I'll demonstrate that again. Turn around this way. So, we have a talented opponent here in front of us. We move in, we use the slap and catch method to secure the gi pants. I use a post method on the opposite knee. I get an angle to expose his ankle to my capture. Now from here, I go straight over the top and lock up. I move to the side, so I come out perpendicular at the hip line. So my first goal is to get my whole body to the hip line and capture his knee. Once the knee is captured, I go back to the center line. Keeping my knees off the mat, I'm in a position now where I can easily pommel and backstep to capture the leg. Now, as Mateus goes to move, I stay on the hips until I can capture the far hip here. Elbow and knee close together. He goes to put me back in guard. It's so difficult. Now from here I've captured the hips. Now the final target is the head. So I come through my training partner's arms and I get a grip on the back of the collar. When he goes to push me off and frame and do all those things that people do, we just walk our way up and into a strong pin across our training partner's side. Please understand that the central concept we're working here is the juxtaposition between your opponent's center line and the hip line. Our thing is first, capture the ankle. Okay, there's the grip that enables me to do it. There's the angle that makes it easier. And from here I come down and I capture the ankle. Okay, as we capture the ankle, the next thing is to freeze our training partner's hips. Then the next thing is to get over and capture the knee. To do that, I have to walk to the hip line. Once I'm on the hip line, I make the capture. Now I return to the center line. From the center line, I pommel my trapped leg out. And then from here, I stay on the hips. As he tries to move and push me off, we stay persistently on the hips until eventually I take my elbow over and I capture the far hip. I bring my elbow and knee close together. When he goes to shrimp and put me back in guard, you've captured the hips. It's hard for him. The last target is to capture the head. So I pommel my hands between his defensive frames and I go in and I take the collar. Now it's my collar grip versus his frames. Okay, as he pushes and pushes and pushes, we're in a position where we can use the anchor to the head to pull ourselves up and come over the top and make an effective pin of the head and shoulders. Done in this fashion, the over-under pass is this incredibly effective, relentless method of passing that starts with a capture of the ankle, then a capture of the hip, then a capture of your opponent's knee, then taking the knee down into a weak position on the center line where both of your opponent's knees are put on one side of the body. That's always a position of weakness. We pass to the opposite side. Then we focus on bolting the hips down to the floor, and then finally, as with every guard pass, capturing the head. And once we get there, it's done. Now, let's look at one of the truly great guard passes in the entire jiu-jitsu curriculum. This is the knee cut pass, sometimes referred to as a knee slice pass. The idea here is I'm going to use one of my knees to pin my opponent's opposite hip and slide across in a diagonal line in different directions depending upon what my training partner is doing to me, and hopefully end up across our opponent's side. This is among one of the more powerful guard passes in modern competition. It's often seen. It combines very well with other guard passes. There's no question in my mind that if you're going to call yourself a strong guard passer, somewhere in your training, you're going to have to get at least competent at this method of passing and hopefully very good at it. You will get a lot of mileage out of this guard pass all the way through far into your career, starting at white belt all the way well beyond black belt. So let's get good at this one. First, let's look at the basic mechanics of the move. The idea is that when my opponent's working in this position, I can shut down much of my opponent's offense by creating a situation where one of his feet is between my legs. Okay? If my opponent has both of his feet on my body here, it's very easy for him to go into offensive positions. Okay, he can attack my legs, he can do all kinds of things, he can bind himself into my arms. So things get a lot better for me if I can take one of my training partner's feet and put it between my legs. Okay, things get better still if I can use my knee to pin a hip on that side. Okay, that decreases my opponent's mobility to some degree. Things get better still if I can attach one of my arms to my opponent's far side of the body so that my right knee controls his right hip and my right arm controls the left hand side of his body. So both sides of the body are being controlled. Okay. When we work in this kind of position, my goal is to get my knee down to the floor right here at my opponent's hip. If I can do this, you can't always do it, but if you can, you're going to create a very strong wedging effect where your opponent gets caught between the power arm on the far side of the body and your knee wedged here at his near side hip. So when Mateus goes to move around, both sides of the body are wedged by my elbow on one side and my knee on the other. Okay, this is such an inherently strong position that I would actually wager a bet that if you took a good blue belt and started him in that position with the knee on the floor against a good black belt, 9 times out of 10, the blue belt will pass the black belt's guard. Now, of course, a good black belt won't let him get to a position like that, but if you started them in that position, I believe a good blue belt will pass the good black belt's guard most of the time. Okay, that's how innately strong this position is. So, with that in mind, how are we going to get to a position like this? Okay, you probably guessed it has to do with stuffing our opponent's foot once again. Okay, so we're going to start off using the slap and catch method, where I go through and I catch my training partner's pant cuff just on the outside, just like so. Again, this creates a situation where the heel of the hand can control my opponent's ankle in a downward direction. What he wants is to connect his ankle to my hip. Okay, what we want is to put a hand on our training partner's hip and then take a little step so I can stuff his foot between. I don't want Mateus hooking in with his shoelaces into a reverse De La Riva guard. That's good for him, but it's bad for me. So I want to make sure the stuff takes the foot off. Okay, again, if he connects, that's a potential problem. I want to make sure it comes down. And then from this position, we get our knee set in place. Okay, now that's the start. Stuffing the foot and connecting your knee to their hip without a reverse De La Riva hook. Now the big question is, what are you going to do with your power hand? Where are you going to place it? You've got a bunch of good options. I want you to know all of them because they're all good. Okay, so step number one is to work at the distance of the toe line. Okay, again, if I step beyond the toe line, Mateus starts hooking in, and that's all problems from then on. Okay, so I stay just outside the toe line. I get a catch on my training partner's pant leg, just like so, and from here I move over to the side. Okay, the more I move Mateus to the side, the harder it is for him to get a reverse De La Riva hook. The more I just come straight into Mateus, the easier the hook becomes. Okay, so our first thing is to move over to the side, so it's harder for him to get the reverse De La Riva hook. It also creates a better angle and alignment for my knee to go in and make the first contact. Okay, now from here, where am I going to put my power hand? This probably reflects my own personal bias because there's actually a range of places that are very good for the power hand. But I'm going to say right off the bat, the number one place to put your power hand is as an underhook on the far side. Okay, there's other great options. I'll show you all of them. But it's my personal belief that nothing beats far side underhook, near side knee cut. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my hand from the hip. It's going to slide down and my head is going to follow. Okay, from this position, as my head comes down to the chest, I walk my hand through as an underhook. Now, I don't do this. I don't get the underhook and put my knee on the floor. The second my knee goes on the floor, Mateus can put in a knee shield, push away, and now the whole situation's lost. Your goal on the side of your knee connection is to keep your hip to his hip. Hip to hip contact is super important for this pass. Okay, and you immediately lose that hip to hip contact if your other knee goes down to the mat. So everything begins with a capture of the foot, okay, between my legs. From here, I walk to the side, so there's no reverse De La Riva, and I drive my knee in. Now our whole thing is to get the head down. If my head is up, I'll never get the underhook. He'll pommel in, and he'll get the underhook. Okay? So what I want in these situations is head down. Okay, when he goes to pommel inside, it's much more difficult for him. Okay? I come in, I take my own underhook just like so. This knee stays off the mat and my hip pushes into him. So when he tries to take a knee shield, there's just no way. If my body's up right here, the knee shield comes in very easily. So I want my hip pushing into him here. Okay? That's what shuts out his knee shield. If I can get the underhook on this side, this is a very, very strong passing position. Okay? And when we work from here, I typically like to get my knee down to the floor like so. All Mateus can do is desperately hold on with his feet. Okay? When we see that, we're just going to get a hold of our training partner's gi here like so. And from this position, I just bring my body forward so my chin goes towards my own hand. Then I just take my foot and I push his legs away. Then we just pivot around the corner and we block right here with our knee. So when Mateus goes to put me back in guard, I'm blocking. I don't want to be too far out. Now he comes out, puts me back in guard, and we've got to start all over again. Okay? So it's very important we block this area here with our knee. So when he goes to put us back in guard, it's going to be difficult. Okay? So, looking at all that again. Step number 1, get that foot under control. Okay? Step number 2, bring his body somewhat side on. And as a result, we're in perfect position to enter with the knee. As my head comes down towards my training partner, I focus on getting the primary grip, the best grip of them all, an underhook on the far side. Now from here, as he pushes on me, I focus on gripping and driving my knee straight down here to the mat. Now, as Mateus goes to hold me off, I focus here on a pivot. As my head goes towards my own hand, I just pivot and turn. If he captures my foot, then I use a kick out on either one of his knees. I point my toes like a ballerina, so there's less purchase on my foot, and we kick out. Now we pivot. I block my knee close to his hip. When he goes to put me back in guard, he has to move his hips away from me, shrimping away from me, and I will always follow the hips. Okay? Whenever in this position, he wants to move his hips away from me and bring the knee in. So, go back. Whenever I see the hips moving away from me, we always chase the hips, chasing the hips. We never stay stationary and his hips move away, and then the knee comes back in, we're back in guard. Okay? So when we see those hips of his walking away, the cover always chasing until we get a perfect capture of the head and we're across side. Okay? I'm just going to demonstrate that with our asses to the camera so you can see what happens there. Okay, I step up to the toe line. From here we make an initial capture and I bring the knee down towards the floor and come in. As I move head over my training partner, I see opportunities to get through and score the underhook. As I score the underhook, I come forward and plant my knee. My head transfers and I bring my chin to my own hand. Mateus holds on tight to my foot, but then I use a kick-out method, pointing my toes so there's less purchase on my foot. Then from here we pivot and block the head. From here, he goes to put me back in guard, and we focus on chasing the hips. So there's never a space for him to put me back in guard. I finish, my feet enclosed, and now we're set in a very good pin across our training partner's side. Okay? So this is how we use the underhook on our training partner in the standard method. Okay? Now, as good as that underhook method is, it's not the only way of doing things. Let's look now at another fantastic way of using underhooks to go forward and pass. Spacing this one down. Sometimes we'll have an opponent who's in a seated position, looking like so. And from here, we'll get a lapel grip on our training partner, and we use that same method of separating the feet and exposing one of our training partner's feet so I can place my leg into that same position we just looked at. Okay? Now, as we did previously, we go in on a training partner and I get my arm in as an underhook. But when I drive forward this time, I place my head as a base of support down on the floor. And my second hand comes here, out wide. So I've changed my head position. Instead of having my head on the far side, I put my head on the floor on the near side. My knee position doesn't change. It's still there as a wedge on the hip. This gives me a much greater base of support. When my hands lock here, my base is only as wide as my elbows. When I base here, my base is as wide as my hands. So instead of having a base the width of my elbows, I have a base like this, far better. And I didn't sacrifice anything. Here, I'm controlling my training partner with a crossface of my bicep. Here, my crossface is my head. So I still have a crossface. It's just that I'm using my head as a crossface instead of my bicep. And I have double or even triple the width of the base. My opponent will presumably be pushing and resisting. It doesn't matter. I've got his head controlled with my head. And then from here, I just use the same kick-out method that we looked at previously. Then we catch, lift, and block. Once again, he's going to try and put me back in guard. We keep our hips close to his, and then finish with the control of the head. So this is an excellent alternative method of working, using the head as a cross face. Okay. Another excellent method of working from here is to sacrifice cross faces altogether and work instead with double underhooks. Same general principle. We capture the foot, and then from here I get my opponent over to the side, and I bring myself into an underhook situation. Okay. This time, as I bring my head down to the floor, my opponent posts on my hip or my bicep, and I'm having a very hard time putting my hand on the floor or taking cross faces, etc., etc. So I'm just going to take my arm and go underneath both of his arms here as double underhooks. Now as Mateus goes to hold on to me, I just have these double underhooks and I kick out. From the kick out, I transfer my head to the other side. Now there's almost no need for me to worry about him putting me back in guard because I have double underhooks. When he goes to elbow escape, he can't. You have control in both his arms. To elbow escape, he needs his elbow in close. He can't even do that now. So I just walk back into a good spin, and then from here, capture the head, and it's done. So once again, here in front of our training partner, we go through and make an initial capture of the ankle and bring everything down towards the floor. I start fighting to get my hand underneath. Mateus goes defensive on me here, so I pommel my two hands underneath. I put my head down like so. He goes to hold on to my foot desperately like so, and we use a kick-out method and find ourselves across side. He gets to put me back in guard. It's notoriously difficult when you have double underhooks. My knee comes to the armpit, second knee to the hip, and then we just pommel out and capture the head to finish. So this too is an excellent way for us to work. Now, everything we've done so far has been with an underhook on the far side, okay? And I'm not going to lie to you, in my opinion, that is the single best way to control your opponent. There's no better way of controlling both sides of the human body than an underhook on the far side and a knee block on the near side. That creates a line of diagonal control from one hip to the opposite shoulder. It gives you different gripping options between cross-face grips, head block grips, and double underhooks, all of which are incredibly hard for your opponent to stop. Okay, in my opinion, that's as good as it gets. Okay, if you can't pass from there, you're probably not going to pass your opponent's guard at all. Okay, one potential problem when we use this method is your opponent pretty soon figures out if this guy gets an underhook, I'm in deep trouble. So they're all going to make it very hard for you to get that underhook. That's when we've got to start playing a different game. Underhooks are good, but they're not the only option. Another great option is to set my power hand on my training partner's lapel. This too is an excellent way of working, and it actually has some advantages over an underhook. I believe overall the underhook is the better method, but let's not sell yourself short. This lapel grip is also pretty damn good. Let's have a look at it. So we're going on our training partner, we capture the leg, and we bring everything over to the side. When I bring my knee in, I find, to my horror, it's very difficult for me to get underneath his arm. Okay, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to secure the lapel grip here. Okay, this becomes my power hand. From this position, I turn my palm up. Now, I don't have an underhook, but from this situation, I can exert tremendous passing pressure on my opponent. He's probably looking at this point to start using his hands to push away or what have you. We're going to get here above our training partner's elbow, and I'm going to turn my hand, curl your body up towards me, buddy. I'm going to curl my hand from palm up to palm down, and I'm going to use a push that puts my training partner's far shoulder down here on the floor. I set my hips into Mateus, like so. The further my hips are out, the more Mateus can bring in a knee shield on the other side. So I set my hips in. When he goes to bring the knee shield in, no way. Okay? Now as I push down on the far shoulder, I use a kick-out method, putting my foot in, and as a result, I can sink my elbow to the far side, so it becomes like an underhook. It's not an underhook, but it has the same control. Then from this position, we pull up on our training partner's arm, block, capture the head, and then settle down into a good pit. I'm just going to demonstrate that from the other side so you can see what my grip is doing. Okay, we move in on our training partner. I capture my training partner's leg and I set my knee, okay? But Mateus does a good job of preventing me from getting into an underhook. So instead, I set elbow and knee close together, just like so. He goes to push me off. I go through underneath my training partner's arm with the tricep, and then from here, I come forward and I push the far shoulder down. My hips right into my opponent. So when he tries to knee shield, it's very, very difficult. Then my elbow comes down towards the floor and I kick out. When he tries to move away from me, my elbow is like an underhook, even though it's technically not an underhook. It functions the same way. And from here, knees to the floor, elbow comes over the top to capture the head. And then from this position, we find ourselves in a very strong end position to pass. Okay? So these are some fantastic ways to control the far side of our training partner's body and get a good knee cut going. Now, there's going to come a day where your opponent figures out, okay, I see what's going on here. This guy wants to control one side of my body with his knee, and he wants to control the other side of my body with his elbow, either using an underhook or the lapel grip, like so. And so they're going to start denying you both. They're going to make it very hard for you to work to get either a lapel or an underhook on that far side. Whenever we see that, we're going to take a grip here on the near side, and we're going to take advantage of the line of our training partner's jaw. Your opponent's jaw is a very powerful lever, and like any lever, it can be used to mechanical advantage. I'm going to use a crossface and use a forearm to make my opponent turn away. That means I have to flatten my wrist and use the flat part of my wrist to connect Mateus's chin to the far shoulder. Every guard pass defense that Mateus does presupposes his body curling towards me. So what we want to do is use this grip to make him look away and pin this far shoulder to the mat. Remember, guys, ultimately the goal that we're trying to do here is to pin our opponent's far side of the body to the mat. We've been doing it with underhooks. We've been doing it with head position. We've been doing it with elbows. Now we're going to do it with leverage, where I physically turn my training partner's jaw to the other side and put weight over the elbow, and we get a nice pass. So let's have a look at how this might work. We enter in the usual fashion. We bring the knee down, but Mateus is doing a really good job of denying me my grips. So I open the opposite side and put my hand in, and I bring my elbow forward so that my whole forearm goes onto my training partner's jawline. Now I come forward and I pressure my elbow to the far shoulder. Mateus, got to hold me off from here, buddy. It's so difficult. And from here we use a kick out method. Now the good news is this is a very strong method. The bad news is the end of it, the end result is not as stable as the others. Okay? So there's a danger now that as you pass, Mateus will come back in and recover. That's the mechanical weakness of this move. It's a great way to pass, but it's a hard one to finish. So let's look at what we ought to do to finish. Okay, turn you around, Mateus. We enter just like so. Mateus is doing a great job of making it impossible for me to get underhooks on this side. Okay, so I go in, secure, and then from this position, I open the elbow, I come up on the sleeve cuff, and Mateus is going to hold me up, buddy, and I focus on getting my elbow to the far shoulder. I'm sorry, Mateus. And then from here, we go through and kick out. Now, how are we going to finish this one? What's the efficient finish? I step past the shoulder line, and I go elbow to hip. Here. Okay, as Mateus goes to put me back in guard, I join elbow and knee together and I lock the hips down. I use this hand here as a base of support. The danger is Mateus will take his right hand to my tricep and start coming out in this direction. So you can't stay here forever. Okay, so I want to make sure now the hand goes underneath the head, and then we come up and we get a good capture of the head and we're ready to play. Let's have a look at all those details again. So we've got a talented opponent now. This is not his first day at the rodeo, and maybe you've been hitting this move successfully on him to some degree, and he's afraid of you getting underhooks, he's afraid of you getting lapel grips. Okay? So as we go in on our training partner, I'm having a hard time fixing up my usual grips. So as I lose the far lapel, I go through and I gain the near lapel. Don't put the elbow here on the sternum. There's no leverage on the head now. I grab the cuff and I bring the elbow forward and I touch the far shoulder. Sorry, it's not a very pleasant move to drill. Now from here, I come through and kick out. Now I come up to the shoulder line like so. I release and capture the far hip. Now my knee comes to the elbow and I get stable. He goes to buck and move me around, etc., etc. It's not easy. Then I go through and capture the head and we're ready to play. Now, we've been looking at some very effective ways to use the lapels and underhooks to pass this knee cut or knee slice method. If there's one common problem that you're going to run into using this method, it's going to be a knee shield. You've already heard me making reference to this as we've been demonstrating the moves. As you get better and better opponents, they're going to be looking more and more early on in the situation to use this annoying top knee as a shield to prevent me from passing. Okay, so let's start talking now about the knee shield. Okay, the danger is that once we get a hold of our training partner here, he's going to bring the knee across. Okay, and when he gets the knee across, I can't get my knee to the floor, which is the whole point of this position. Okay, it's like, even if I have all my favorite grips, I can't get past the damn knee shield. Okay, so what are we going to do? I'm going to bring my foot in just like so towards me. So I was outstretched like so. I bring my foot up towards my training partner's knee. I'm going to take my knee and I'm going to put it inside the opposite hip. Okay, so I hold sleeve lapel just like so, and I just turn and I drive across with my knee. I connect my elbow and knee together. So when Mateus tries to bring the knees shield back in, it's impossible. Now, with elbow and knee together, we go into the same passes that we've been looking at. Okay, from here, I drop the knee down. I use the kick out method. And from here, I capture my opponent's hip with my hip and elbow. As he tries to push me off from the situation, it won't be easy. We collect the head and end up capturing the head and a cross side. Okay, the basic idea behind a knee shield is that this knee must point at me. So what I do is I make his knees point away. Okay, make the knees point away. So I get a capture on my training partner's leg, and he comes in and gets in a knee shield. Okay, he set it successfully. From here, look how I use my knee to point into the opposite hip, just like so. Make a strong knee shield, Mateus. So my knee points from his right hip to the left hip, and I walk across the body. Okay, I join elbow and knee in together and come back. From this position, we get a good kick out. Now we go over the top and pin. Okay, a word to the wise: it's the best time to stop a knee shield is before it even comes in. So anytime we get our favorite pin position like so, the onus is on us to join elbow and knee together. The weaker the connection of elbow and knee, the more this happens. Okay, so our whole thing is to connect elbow and knee in this position. Okay, if I have an underhook, the onus is on me under these circumstances to always slouch my hips into his hips. If my knee comes down towards the floor, that's when knee shields start coming in. Okay, so what I want from the knee cut position is no space between his hips and mine. If this happens, it's a guarantee the knee shield comes in. So always hip to hip contact here. Okay, whether we're going underhook or what have you. Now when he goes to bring knee shields in, it's physically impossible. Okay. Now, we've been through a lot of stuff where we had a power hand set on the far side of his body, whether it be here with lapel grips, here with underhooks. We look with the power hand controlled the far side of the body by default, where I took the elbow across to the far shoulder and we controlled him this way. So even though I gripped the near side, the pressure was on the far side. Okay, but there's always going to come that day where you can't get your power hand set on the far side of the body. So what are you going to do? You're going to set your power hand on the near side of the body. Okay, and the usual time we do this is when our opponent's got a very strong Very effective knee shield. Okay, we know that the whole game is to get our knee as a wedge in this position, because that creates a wedge between my right knee and my far side power hand. Okay, my power hand wedges the far side of the body, my knee wedges the near side of the body. But if my opponent has a well set knee shield, and I've tried all my tricks and none of it's working, I just couldn't get his damn knee shield out. Now I'm never going to be able to get my knee to the floor and form an effective wedge. So what are we going to do? Okay, I'll show it from the start. I go in on my training partner, I capture the foot, I come in, but I make a boo-boo. My elbow and knee are not well connected, and as a result, he's got a really good knee shield, and this kid knows what he's doing. Okay, I'm trying to work the knee, and none of it's happening. Okay, so I'm going to take my hand, and I'm going to set the power hand on the near lapel. Instead of going far lapel, the standard method, I'm going to go near lapel, just like so. Okay, this gives me good control of the head. The whole idea of a power hand is it controls the head. Okay, it's the basic idea behind it. Your opponent's collar and lapel is essentially a noose around his head. So anytime you pull that noose, the head moves. Okay? So when I control here, by default, I'm controlling Mateus's head. Now, I'm controlling the head from the other side. Okay? If Mateus locks onto me in this position, my second hand is going to come through like so. And I'm going to put my wedge here on the floor. So instead of wedging with my knee, I wedge with my fist. I can't drive straight forward anymore. The knee shield stops me. So instead, I go below the knee. I put my knee below his knee, here. And I slide out in this direction. He cannot stop me moving in that direction. Okay? Now, instead of my knee wedging the hip, my fist is doing it. When he tries to bring his knee in and put me back in guard, it's blocked. I keep my knee off the mat, so I had mobility and weight on the man. And from this position, I come around the corner and I start driving across. Okay? One good way for us to work here is to go over the top and capture. I turn back towards the man, I make my hand into a hook and pull to make the knees point away from me. And as a result, we end up across our training pocket side. So this is one good way for us to finish here. So once again, we're working here with a talented opponent. I go through and make an initial capture. I don't do a good job of joining elbow and knee, and he brings in a strong, resolute knee shield. Okay? So from here, I go through and I grab right there, controlling the head. Now I need to block the hip. So I come through with my fist. As my head comes down, Mateus is blocking me with his knee shield. I can't get my knee to the mat. Under these circumstances, we always go below the knee. My knee below his. Mateus, try to hold me. I don't care how strong he is. He'll never stop you from freeing your leg. Now I walk away from his knee shield. Just like so. Okay? I come around the corner, and from this position, many ways for us to go. One is to go over the top, make your hand into a hook, and use a throw by. To throw his knees by. That's one great way to do it. But it's not the only one. You might be saying to yourself, dude, I'm 130 pounds. How the hell am I going to take a 250-pound man, hook his leg and throw it? Okay? Good question. You probably won't be able to do it. So instead, we're going to use our legs to walk his legs away. So if the guy's substantially bigger and stronger than you, instead of using a throw by with the hand, I'm going to use hip pressure to put him down. So we go through on our training partner. Mateus does a great job of bringing the knee shield in, and I'm having a hell of a time removing that knee shield. Okay. From this general situation, a great way for us to operate is to go near side power hand instead of the traditional far side power hand. With near side power hand, I replace my hand in like so as a wedge. Mateus can do whatever he wants to hold me now. I just point my knee below his knee. That's the direction he can't stop. I'm wedging with my fist in the floor, and I walk away from my training partner's legs. As I walk past his knee line, here, I go through on my training partner. I can reposition my hand to control the head, or you can stay with the lapel grip. That's your choice. And then from here, I walk back into his hips. And I use the strength of my legs to walk his hips away. Now from here, as he goes to put me back in guard, his hips are beaten. I come up and control the head, and as always, we finish every guard pass on the head. Okay? So, again, with Mateus working bottom position, we go through, we capture our training partner's leg, and we come down here into this good attacking position. But Mateus does a great job of coming through and putting in that annoying knee shield. So I come through and I take a power hand on the near side, controlling the head like so. I bring my fist through on my training partner. Now I bring my knee below his knee. From this position, I walk away from my training partner's knees. His knees are here. I beat the knees, coming out all the way and past. From here, I walk back into my training partner's hips. I get in front of his knees with my hips. If his knees are in front of me, I'm never walking. So I come up above his knees. And then I just backstep and make his knees point away from me. As the knees point away, it's hard for him to put me back in guard. As he tries to put me back in guard, we stay on the hips and then finally come up and pin the head and shoulders. Okay? This principle of the directionality of your knee slide is super important. Okay, I'm going to come close to the camera now. And we're going to talk about this because it's a very important topic. The whole idea behind the knee slice or knee cut is that my knee cuts across the hip and forms a block here at my opponent's hip, so that my knee blocks one hip and my elbow hopefully controls the far side of the body. Okay, that's the traditional method of doing it. It's a damn good one. But there's always going to be that day that your opponent, either because he's using a knee shield or perhaps because he's using an elbow block and putting his elbow underneath his own knee, is preventing me from getting my knee to the floor. Okay? Whenever we see that kind of behavior going on, our number one method of acting is always to take our knee below his knee. Normally, let's take your arm out. Take your knee out. Normally, that's my goal. My knee is a block down here. And I'm telling you now, a lot of times you're going to be able to do that, even on good opponents. Okay, if you set it up well, you're going to get that a lot of times. But there's also going to be that guy who never gives it to you. Okay, and now it's like, oh man, this is tough. Okay, I can't get my knee to the floor, and it's not going to happen. Whenever I can't go forward, I go below the knee. Okay, so look how I just turn my knee below his. And then from here, I slide away from the pointing of his knees. Okay? Don't go too much down to the floor. Keep your knees off the mat, hip off the mat, so you've got weight on the man. Okay? And then your goal is to walk past the line of his knee and get your ass in front of his knee. Then walk back so his knees point away from you. When his knees point away from you, how's he going to put you back in guard? Every act of putting you back in guard requires that his knees point towards you. Okay? So you walk the knees away. When you've killed the hips, you come up and pin the head. Okay? So you always finish on the head, but you kill the hips first. So let's have a look at all those details again. Okay, we've got an opponent here in front of us. We do a good job of getting him on his side, and from here we're going to work. But Mateus does a great job of coming in and securing that damn knee shield is slowing me down. Okay, he might even have his elbow underneath his own knee, really slowing me down. So from here I take my knee and I pass it below his knee. I point my knee at my own foot and I move away from my opponent. Now from here I walk and walk until my ass goes in front of his knees. Then I back up and I make his knees point away from me. And as a result, when he goes to put me back in guard, it's very, very difficult. And from here, I come up and I capture the head for the finish. Okay? So those are some simple ways for us to employ the knee cut pass. One of the absolute best guard passes in all of jiu-jitsu. You could easily build a whole passing game just around this one pass and the reactions you get off it as your opponent tries desperately to defend exactly what you're doing. Okay, let's understand the main mechanical principles. The idea that your first goal is to shut down his offense, legs up, by stuffing the foot between your legs. Okay, Second goal is to prevent a knee shield coming across straight away. So we block the hip and get our knee and elbow close together. You have your number one choice as underhook on the far side. If you can't do that, power hand set, elbow controls the far side. Can't do that, power hand sets near side, elbow goes across the far shoulder. Okay? If we can't do that, we go power hand near side. The biggest problem we're going to face is that your opponent's knee shield. Okay? So it's important when we lock up, our elbow and knee always be close together, working in unison to make it tough for him to do so. If he is a good man and gets through and perhaps even blocks underneath his own knee, this will make it physically impossible to get the desirable knee on the floor position. Whenever we can't get knee on the floor, the onus is on us to take our knee below his knee and move away from the man's annoying blocking knees. Okay? Then I continue walking out. His two knees are crushed together on one side of his center line. It's never a good thing for him. And we get our ass in front of his knees. So I can walk his knees away from me and prevent him putting me back in guard. And as always, finish every guard pass, pinning your opponent's head and shoulders. If we can do those things and operate according to those simple principles, you're going to pass a lot of people's open guards.